There are some amazing manufacturers in the 1 to 400 scale model aircraft landscape. Today, we're going to make a tier list of all these different manufacturers. While this is going to be subjective, there are so many different vantage points to consider, and I hope all of you are excited to see where companies like GeminiJets, NG Models, and others will land. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started, everybody. What's going on, everybody? Hope all of you are having a fantastic day today. And today we're going to be doing a tier list, like I said, of all these different 1 to 400 scale diecast model aircraft manufacturers. So I'm eager to see how everybody's going to stack up. I thought this would be a really fun idea. Now, again, this is my own personal opinion, and the main criteria that I'm going to be utilizing for today's video is the quality of the aircraft, the popularity of all the different aircraft they're making, along with the geography, where they're making the aircraft for, and then lastly, just the overall quality control of the aircraft. So a wide overall perspective. But once again, this is simply my opinion. I would love to hear what you think in the comment section below, so feel free to let me know in the comments. But nevertheless, I'm just going to provide my thoughts, and there's so many to get into today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll start with some of the bigger ones, and I'll transition to some of the intermittent ones, and then lastly, I'll finish with GeminiJets and NG Models because I know all of you are curious where those are going to be on this list. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to start here with JC Wings. I think this would be a fun company to start with, and I think JC Wings has done a really good job. Obviously, their molds have got much better over the last several years, and their release choices have also been pretty fascinating as well. While they've primarily focused on Asia, they've also had a couple of aircraft from some different regions, and every once in a while they'll even do an aircraft from the United States. So I certainly valued that, and I think it's really cool. I think JC Wings, though, despite this, has some lower quality molds, and some of their release choices can be redundant at times. So with that being said, I think they're going to be lower on the A scale. I certainly think that they're very justified for a high quality aircraft manufacturer, but I also don't think they're the best. So definitely great products, though, and I definitely think they're doing a good job with what they do. So overall, JC Wings definitely is going to be on the lower side of A. The next company we're going to talk about is Aviation 400. Aviation 400 specializes in all kinds of international wide-body aircraft. They have some of the highest quality model aircraft out there, and if you strictly care about quality, you're absolutely going to love Aviation 400. And for this reason, typically I would not put a company that's so limited in the S tier category, but simply due to how nice their models are and also their expansion over the last several years, just in conjunction with that, they are the only 1 to 400 model aircraft manufacturer that has 3D beacons, along with the detachable landing gear. I think that's extremely valuable in 2025, and I know so many collectors care about that so much, and myself included. So I think it's only fair that they go in the lower part of S tier, even though, like I said, they don't have the best selection of any of these model aircraft manufacturers. The product just speaks for itself, and you could argue it's the best product in 1 to 400 scale. So Aviation 400 definitely is going into S tier. The next company I want to take a look at before we jump to some of the different companies is going to be Panda Models. And Panda Models as well certainly specializes in so many different aircraft types, and the majority of their molds are some of the absolute best out there. Very similar concept to Aviation 400. However, Panda Models really specializes in the narrow body sector and some of the different regions around the world. You'll see all kinds of aircraft from Asia, all kinds of aircraft even from the United States and beyond. And I certainly think Panda Models is in a very similar situation to what Aviation 400 is. What comes to my mind, though, when I think of Panda Models is they don't have any major distinguisher, excluding that they have pretty good molds, right? They don't have a 3D beacon, or they don't have detachable gear, which obviously I wouldn't expect any of that on narrow body aircraft. But for those reasons, I think other manufacturers like NG Models stacks up pretty well to Panda. For those reasons, I think Panda is going to go very high on the A side. I think Panda has done a really good job with what they offer. I just don't think that they can quite make S tier, since they don't have any distinguishing vantage points that a company like Aviation 400 would have. That doesn't take away from how good they are. They're a great manufacturer, and they do great with what they specialize in, but I have to recognize that aspect of this particular discussion. The next company we're going to talk about today, we're actually going to really shift gears a little bit. These are all the major manufacturers that I could think of, and I'll definitely do a refreshed video in the future with more companies. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and talk about Postage Stamp. Postage Stamp specializes in, mainly some of these hybrid type molds. I wouldn't say they're all plastic, but it's a different type of, I don't think it's a metal, but different type of material. I think they do a really good job at the price point. I would like to see the aircraft a little bit, better and so forth, but I do think they do a pretty good job for what they're worth. I definitely think that Postage Stamp definitely deserves quite a bit of credit, and they're really good for display, but I still think the price is a little high for what you get. Most of the aircraft are pretty good, but paying for this size of an F-18 or whatever it would be, $23, $24, up to $29. I think it's a little bit much, but I do really like what they do. I think they're really high on the B scale. I do really like where they're going. I think they just need to enhance that product a little bit more, maybe even start thinking about antennas and so forth if they are going to charge what they're charging for it. But I do think that they're definitely doing a good job, and I'm happy with the progression. A very interesting company on this list is Herpa Models. As we know, Herpa is a 1:500 predominant scale, but obviously they do have some 1:400s, and they have not progressed with how their price point has anytime. And I know obviously you produce their aircraft in Europe, so obviously here in the United States they're going to be a little bit more pricey. But even when you're in Europe, obviously those prices, why not just go ahead and buy a Gemini jet or an NG model or another manufacturer that has more details? So I certainly think that they're way behind on that aspect. I do like the colors and so forth, most of the molds, but between the plastic along with not much enhancement besides just a couple of Wi-Fi boxes in that 1:400 sector, I think Herpa unfortunately is going to get a C. You know, I like what they're trying to do, but they can't charge these prices and expect to compete with everybody else. So they're going to score lower than most. I'm hoping not to put anybody in F today, but as of for the 1:400 scale, and I threw a couple 1:200s in here by the way as well. It's just primarily to give us some good variety and so forth. But Herpa, I think, does get a C. It's unfortunate, and same goes for their 1:500s. The 1:200s are great, but obviously they specialize in that 1:500 scale. And, you know, we'll kind of throw all the scales in here a little bit, but mainly a 1:400 focus. But I definitely think that we have to consider that when we're thinking about that company. Next, we're going to talk about Hogan. Hogan and a couple of others here, obviously, are 1:200. And once again, I was just trying to give some good variety and so forth. So primarily a 1:400 focus, but for these couple, we'll focus on 1:200. And obviously, there's some slight variation for the companies with the different scales, but I still think they would end up ranking out about the same for the most part. Now, Hogan 1:200, I definitely think that they've done a really good job. Obviously, previously they had some atrocious looking Boeing 787s, but they definitely turned the corner a little bit and definitely are getting it going. So I'm definitely happy to see that. I really like where Hogan's going, and I'm eager to see what they do next. I like the variety. I think they're also going to be at the bottom of B, but I'd just like to see them continue to move up the ladder a little bit. But I definitely think they're doing a pretty good job for what they're worth. So Hogan's doing pretty good, and definitely we absolutely love to see that. And one company that we really don't think about very much that has been making models for a long time and doing a very good job at it is Flight Miniatures. I certainly think they've done a really good job, but a very similar story to Postage Stamp regarding that they just haven't enhanced the detail very much. And obviously the price has gone up a little bit on those. But, you know, they're still nice and simple, and there is value to that. They're kind of like the Aeroclassics of 1:200 is how I think of Flight Miniatures. But the amount of variety and quantity that they make of highly desirable aircraft is certainly unmatchable. So I do really want to recognize that. I think they go right at the top of B. They could definitely be flirting with A tier, but I definitely think that they make sense going into B here and how that kind of all implies. So definitely looking very nice right there. And as we're continuing to move companies down here, I'll just go ahead and resize this up a little bit so you all can see this a little bit better. So let's just go ahead and get that spaced out there a little bit, and let's go ahead and talk about the rest of these manufacturers. Let's just go ahead and get Inflight knocked out. Inflight's done an amazing job. They're simply an S. I mean, Inflight is one of the best die-cast model aircraft manufacturers out there. They've done an immaculate job between the variety, the popularity, the quality of their models. Like, the only major issue I've ever seen from Inflight is I had an American 757 with some wing flex. Otherwise, I don't think that there's been any major issues with them. They have great 3D beacons, great antennas, awesome stands. Some of my favorite models I have in my collection are Inflight 200s, like the United A321neo and, you know, all the American 737s and so forth. I love what Inflight 200 is doing. They're a great manufacturer. It is the high of the high regarding 1:200 scale. They are the Aviation 400 of 1:200 scale, but with the amazing variety. They are awesome, highly recommended, and I certainly think that they definitely deserve it here. So that's absolutely awesome to see. The next company we're going to highlight is Skymarks. Skymarks has done a pretty good job. I got a couple of them that I'm looking at right here through my shelf and so forth, and they're pretty high quality for the most part. While they're simple, they definitely serve their purpose, but that is the caveat here for Skymarks. I think that you pay way too much to not get more detail on what they're presenting. I do like the large scale aircraft they produce, but I would expect a little bit more detail for that price point. So I think that they're going to work on a high B as well, and I think they're a little bit better than Flight Miniatures, but once again, for the money that you're spending, it's very similar to Flight Miniatures. In the proportion aspect, I would expect more detail at that price point. So that's mainly the reason why you're seeing all these plastic manufacturers down here. But once again, I just wanted to include them. I thought it'd be fun, but you know, it is a nice distinguisher from Herpa. So definitely very fascinating there to say the least. So that's where they're going to fall on this list. We're getting down to our major companies. Let's go ahead and knock out Aeroclassics. And this is a really tough one. While Aeroclassics has some amazing variety and simplistic molds and, very accurate molds along with some really good variety, they haven't enhanced their landscape any, and they're kind of pricey for not any enhancement. There's amazing value to them, and like I said about Flight Miniatures, they're very unique in what they do and the amount of variety and popularity that they get. But again, it's just not very impressive with no antennas and so forth in 2025. So obviously quite a few vantage points of how you could take that, but from my personal vantage point, I think that they fall into B. I love the variety, and I think that really helps them out to bring them up to the top, especially with those retro aircraft that people really value. But once again, it's tough to see them getting any higher than that, considering that they haven't had any enhancements and they are really specialized on some aircraft. So, and also their colors sometimes I think the colors really, can definitely make it justified for B. Like most of them they've done a good job on, but there's been too many times where they're completely flopped. So I think that they go into B, but they're still a great company and they do really good work, and I'm definitely happy to see what they've done so far. Phoenix is another one of those interesting manufacturers that's really changed over the last several years. They make really good variety of aircraft, but they still have a couple of shortcomings, like the Boeing 787 Wingflex, for example. However, I don't want that to take away from the awesome molds that they do have. Like the Airbus A330 is a really good one, and some of these have interesting nose shapes, but most of them are pretty good. Also want to highlight the A330neo. That's a really great one, in the Airbus A350. I certainly think they're a really good company, and I think they go right at the top of B. Once again, the price is a little high considering that those molds aren't absolutely perfect. I can spend almost the same amount of money on a Phoenix as I could on an NG, for example, or even getting close to an Aviation 400 and get a much better aircraft. And since there's so much overlap there, I definitely think it makes sense to place Phoenix there in the B category. Now we're down to our big two. I know there's going to be quite a bit of subjectiveness, but I'll just go ahead and say that we will see where these two fall, and we'll see who goes over who and where they're going to go. So first and foremost, we're going to start with NG models. Obviously NG, this would have been a very different ranking if this would have been even 2 years ago for what I'm going to give. The hard products won the best in the 1 to 400 scale, especially if you're looking for any sort of Asia aircraft, US aircraft, so forth. What Aviation 400 doesn't make and what Panda doesn't make, NG's has it with that next generation quality, which is so valuable. I absolutely love that, and I'm so glad to see NG producing quite a variety of aircraft that have the high quality mold. But unfortunately, that's almost where it ends. Now, there are some other perks. I do want to mention CRP when it is functional, but unfortunately, the lack of functionality for that is took away from the point of that particular program. And I also want to make another note regarding, the overall just the unique ideas they've had. The NG Light product line is a very fascinating concept, along with the Ultimate Collection aircraft. I think there's a time and place for it, but NG's logic for releasing aircraft, along with the lack of complete variety, they do a really good job on stints, and I know that they primarily focus on the Asia market, so I definitely respect and acknowledge that. But there's been too many times where they've just, completely overutilized the concept. Like, I understand doing 2 of each. I can start to get behind that a little bit with the manufacturer knowledge and so forth. But 5, 6 different ones of A350s and so forth, you're just wasting quality and opportunities when you could be doing aircraft that have never been done before. So I can't not acknowledge that. The other, note that I really want to make is their outreach online is just terrible. When we've been told that we're going to get this aircraft and don't get it, the question is why. And trying to get it communicated to them that we want to see more variety in the releases just hasn't got the message across. While they have had some really good stints, like I've said, it's definitely been frustrating. But this goes back to the hard product being so good and why you can never lose faith in a company like this and just how much work they've done for the community. This puts them at the top of A. They're not going to go into S tier in my book. I think that, there's just too much to, take away from the lack of choices and so forth. But I definitely really am happy with, or not lack of choices, but, lack of highly popular aircraft in the US and especially like Europe and other regions that really need some of these aircraft. But I definitely really appreciate what they're doing. They're doing a good job. I would just like to see them do an S tier job since they're capable. Now, 2 years ago, they probably do go in S tier because the variety was there and they did a little bit better with the overall demographic. But until they get back to that, I think A tier is where they land. And that leaves us with one of the most long-standing companies in the 1 to 400 and 1 to 200 scales, and all the different product lines they have, GeminiJets. And GeminiJets obviously is a very fascinating company for quite a variety of reasons. But Gemini, 3 years or 2 years ago, even they would have been, a B on this list, and even 4 years ago, just because of, how frustrating it was to have the same problem year over year and so forth. They may have been getting close there with Herpa and maybe even beyond that. Gemini's turned it around over the last several years. I made that video a couple months ago. They've done an amazing job enhancing the lineup of their aircraft. And while, there's still some aspects to be desired, like the nose shape on the Boeing 737 NG mold. You also don't want to forget about the engine and nose landing gear sizes, the Airbus CFMs. There's still quite a variety of aspects that Gemini has yet to master. It has got better, and there's proven quality control for that. For example, the Boeing 737 NG's wing flex used to be a major problem. Same for the Embraer 175s. That's simply been resolved, and it's been awesome to see the resolution of that and so much better effort regarding, whatever they've done instruction-wise or the workers there or whatever's happened, it's got fixed, and that's been so exciting to see. I also really want to highlight the colors. The colors just used to be a mess. Some of the American Airlines aircraft that came out several years ago was an absolute derailed dumpster fire. There's no doubt about that. And GeminiJets has done a fantastic job to turn it around and provide so many awesome aircraft with great colors. Another really good example is mastering that Southwest 737 that they just released. That color can be tricky too at times, and they did a really good job getting it spot on with that recent release. While all this is great and so forth, I can't overlook, the aspect of some of those 1-400 molds that simply aren't proportional and that NG has them beat on. So that's very important, but they do a great job with the amount of release variety along with the demographics. And I also really want to highlight unique aspects that they've really innovated on. A couple other companies have done the flaps down, but that's definitely been a big part of their world, along with the interactive aircraft that they've partnered with for JC on that. Those have been so cool, and they've really done a great job bringing all those aircraft to life. And I also want to highlight what's another big part of Gemini's game is all the model airport accessories. Obviously 3D printings became a big part of that market, but GeminiJet still has the airport diorama that you can display along with the various ground service equipment and quite a few other features. So Gemini, just for the sake of the release variety, a little bit better choices, and some of the molds, especially some of the wide bodies being comparable to NG, not quite superior, but you could definitely compare a little bit, like the Boeing 77 and so forth. Gemini is going to score right above NG, and I know this might be a controversial take, but I think Gemini deserves this. I think they've done a really good job. And I don't think there's any reason why we should take this away from them. Gemini has certainly been a wonderful company. They support the majority of my entire collection and your collection likely as well. And it's been impressive to see what they've done. Now, obviously, the prices have went up exponentially in the last 5 years. A good bit of that's out of their control completely. But, despite that, they've still done an amazing job, and they're releasing aircraft that people want. And at the end of the day, I think that is what makes a model aircraft manufacturer as good or as bad as it's going to be. And those release choices are whether you're going to buy it or not. And obviously, Inflight 200's definitely got that down. Aviation 400 to a particular market's definitely got that down. Aviation 400, it's definitely really close right there. They need to go there. But Aviation 400 really has done a good job in a particular market. But the high quality and how distinctive it is, I just think it makes it worth it to put them in S. But obviously, this list I think came together really well. I really am happy with this. The Phoenix, could be flirting with A and so forth. But, I think this is exactly what it should be. I hope to see these companies continue to rise. I hope NG doesn't keep going backwards, because they will go backwards on my list. But who knows, maybe in a year or so I'll revisit this list and see what we can add and subtract from it. But with the current assessment, I think this definitely turned out really well, and I'm definitely really happy with what companies we have on here, the amount of variety, and just overall how this all came together. So feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section below. Where would you place them differently? Do you agree with my list? I know there's going to be some controversial takes here, but once again, this is subjective. This is simply my opinion from an overall vantage point, and I definitely think that you have to recognize especially the release choices and some of the other aspects of this to really gain a full picture on this subject. So feel free to let me know in the comment section below. But nevertheless, I really hope all of you enjoyed watching. Thank you all so much for watching today. Take it easy, everybody. Stay safe. Trust the process. Do you love and love you do? My name's CM Aviation. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon as CM Aviation is signing off.